just follow ski tracks and bass trails.
Well, I think I don't know where he was going from where to where. He headed off to the north behind our next door neighbor's house after he left us. But it was a real treat.
We have a lot of red poles right now at our feeder.
A what? Red
poles.
Yeah, we do too. They've really been prominent this year.
Yeah, I had the feeder with the thistle seed in it for 2 months, just sitting there untouched.
And now all of a sudden,
finally they found it.
Yeah.
That and the red-bellied woodpecker.
Oh, nice.
Comes once in a while.
Yeah. No, I keep looking for a red-bellied woodpecker on our feeders, but I haven't never seen one.
Yeah. And then our neighbors, we don't really get it too often. 2 Carolina wrens.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's great. I've had a brown creeper, not every time, not every day, but
oh good. Yeah.
I'll get a brown creeper.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I haven't heard from Reed, so I don't know if he's going to show up this morning.
Okay, I can start the meeting.
Okay.
All right, I saw there was a message from Kim. Is she?
She's here. She just says she has to leave early.
Okay, got it. I saw it. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I'm here. We're just like in my kitchen making breakfast, and I decided that everyone didn't need to see what that looks like.
But before we start, I just wanted to say, Kim, that was a really good piece you had in Front Porch Forum a couple of days ago.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just felt like I wasn't going to post anything, but I felt like somebody needed to just say, not everything that's being said is accurate.
I know it. That's right. Well, it was very well done, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Kim.
Yeah, that was good. I think it's going to be an issue that the town's going to have to deal with, a dog park. Because it seems to be a pretty hot topic on Front Porch Forum.
Yeah, when I asked about a dog park, it seemed like I guess it can get going, but it seemed like the staff did not have enough resources to get going on that. So,
Laura, who did you ask?
I'm so bad at names. Who's the person that runs the rec department?
Yeah, Todd Goodwin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not really. I don't think he's really in favor of one, but anyway, I've been paying attention to the chatter on Front Porch Forum about dogs as well. So,
Melinda, who was the woman that I worked with when the first committee was together, and we had a couple of public sessions?
Barb,
yes, Barb. And she was a dog owner that was interested in, she said that sometimes she might think about taking up and organizing dog owners who wanted a dog park.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything from her. So I don't know what she's doing, where she is.
Yeah.
Seems like the drive behind it ought to come from the dog owners getting together and with a plan and a project, looking for appropriate land, etc.
Yep, that's right.
I wonder if there should be a call put out, like the Adoptive Trail program, out a message and said, anybody interested? And that might get those folks together, get them started. And
Well, supposedly one of the Front Porch Forum posters was starting a petition to add a dog park to Catamount. So I think that if that happens, there's a petition, then somebody could, you know, explain why there's not actually room at Catamount, but there might be another area, and that group could potentially take it up. I think I feel like this happens every once in a while where there's like all this upsetness and chatter on Front Porch Forum, and it never seems to go beyond like disgruntled emailing. And so I sort of remain unconvinced that the like critical mass of people willing to like volunteer and take action, and you know, the actual work that needs to be done hasn't been there. So maybe it will be this time.
I think to me, there's two different types of dog owners. There's one dog owner that wants a park that has a fence that they can go to and just let their dog run and play with other dogs. And then there's the other side group is someone who wants to actually walk their dog and go out on these trails, unleash or unleash. And then the other people kind of fall in between, but there seems to be these two different camps of what they want.
Yeah, we might hear about this at the Catamount Forest Committee meeting on Monday. So anybody that comes to that meeting, we can direct them and inform them a little bit more of what's going on.
Best of luck, Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck, Laura.
I'm not worried about it. I just think there are people that really don't have a good understanding. I mean, on the surface, if you talk to anybody down the street who wasn't involved, they'd say, oh yeah, dogs at Catamount, that sounds nice. But I just think that people, once they have a little bit of understanding, I think most people will say, oh, okay, that makes sense. But we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to call this meeting to order unless Reed's there.
Reed is there.
I am here now after some technical difficulties.
Okay, great.
All right, let's kick off with the minutes from January 20th.
Hold on a second. Sorry.
May have some public comment. Looks like a couple of.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Carl.
I don't have anything particular. Thank you.
Thanks, Reed.
So Regina Mahoney is here from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and Jeff Farrell is here from Farrell Associates. They are the consultant working on form-based code. So a little later on in the meeting, we're going to hear from them.
Okay, great. Let's continue reviewing the minutes then. So excuse me, I have to close my door.
I
Any
make a
comments or
motion,
corrections?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
I'll just point out that at the bottom of number 4, the bulleted numbered bullets start with bullet number 2 instead of 1. You might want to fix that, so in case someone thinks that another recommendation was lost somewhere along the way.
Okay, thanks.
Good catch, Eric. It's funny how your brain just fills in what should be there. Any other additional comments?
I would just say that I thought Melinda gave a very accurate rendition of that long Chatham Woods discussion.
Agreed.
Yes, nice job, Melinda.
Thanks.
Laura, if you'd update your motion to be as amended.
I motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Do we have a second? Second from Gary. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right. Next up, we've got, looks like we're going to go to staff report first today. Is that right, Melinda?
Yeah. So last night was the first discussion by the select board of a potential policy for trapping on town land. I provided them a memo. Oh, wait, that's not the right one. That one. Just with a few different policy options. I think I shared that memo with you as well. And I kind of went over these various options. One of which would be a blanket policy that just says the town's not going to give permission to trap on town land. And then a second where trapping would be allowed only under emergency conditions. And then a third where the select board would consider trapping on a case-by-case basis and make a decision based on some different factors. And then I also stated your recommendation made at the last meeting regarding posting a sign at the access point of all of the parcels that aren't currently posted, just informing people that depending on what policy, if any, the select board chooses to adopt, the just that trapping is allowed by permission or trapping is not allowed. This parcel's town owned. And I may also include some other information, more generic, because we've had other issues on town-owned parcels such as snowmobilers and so forth recently. So I may just include some other generic rules like no motorized vehicles and so forth, and just put up a sign at each at the access point to each parcel. So anyway, the select board discussed this. They didn't take any action. Some testimony was heard from various members of the public. I think just 3 people spoke, and they decided they needed more information before they could draft any policy. And so I believe that at a future meeting, they're going to invite someone from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they may invite others as well to provide information. And it's very likely that if they draft a policy, it will come to you to review first, and then you can make some recommendations to the select board regarding any policy. So anybody have any questions about that?
Melinda, I listened in last night. I was actually pretty impressed with the vet that spoke at first. And it seems like there's a disconnect between what Fish and Wildlife is saying as far as, you know, they don't get very many domestic animals caught in, and what other people are saying. And since then I've seen on Front Porch Forum, people saying, yeah, my dog was gone for a week and came back with a trap on his leg. And it just.
And a vet posting about how many animals how many domestic pets people bring to her to have traps removed. So could it be like a reporting thing?
Yeah, I don't know, because I know that there was a nationwide survey of veterinarians done, and including Vermont. And in Vermont, I think they sent, I can't remember how many invitations to the survey they sent out, but 54 Vermont veterinarians responded. And out of those 54, the rate of injuries to pets due to traps was pretty low. It was like 6 animals a year were injured due to traps. And I think they had calculated that during the same time period, they compared that to the number of target species captured, and it was like less than 0.5% of those were captured were pets. So there is a discrepancy in the reporting for sure, and I don't know what the reason is for that, but I do think it's important. I mean, I would ask that person to provide a source for that statistic that 2 out of 3 animals captured is non-target, because that just doesn't, it seems suspect to me. And I think it's important moving forward that we base decisions on authoritative sources of information.
So I also sat in on the meeting last night and listened, and it was good to hear sides. And I think that's what the select board decided, was they need to hear from more, not only the Fish and Wildlife and the trappers, but also other folks, the Protect Our Wildlife and animal defenders. And I think that one of the things that Peggy was trying to get across was the pain and suffering that animals go through when they're trapped. And the fact that a lot of times when there are cats or dogs, but mostly cats, are caught in the traps, the hunter doesn't, or the trapper doesn't necessarily let that cat go. They will kill it. And one thing that someone did mention is that, people are told that, oh, a fisher must have gotten your cat, to where, you'll never know really if your cat was, if the cat was killed. And that seems to be a better way to deal with, a pet caught in a trap. If you never know what happened to it, then trapping doesn't get a bad rap. So I think we really have to look at every aspect, all the aspects of there. A lot of people post on Front Porch Forum that they're missing their cat, and sometimes they're never found, and that could be one reason. But I think that it's good. The select board it's not going to be a short, quick decision. They're going to do a lot of, taking information from different groups over the next few months.
One thing that I thought was interesting in the stuff you sent us, Melinda, was the link to the best management practices for trapping. And what I learned from that is how much more complicated the whole topic of trapping is than I had ever imagined. I mean, that thing listed hundreds of different types of traps that were to be used for different species under different circumstances. It was very complex and very confusing. But one thing that kind of struck me was that a lot of those traps that were included in best management practices did not look like they were particularly inhumane traps. Or I mean, humane, they didn't look like they were humane traps. It looked like there was a lot of suffering would occur even with the traps included in best management practices.
Melinda, I have a question. So when the discussion was happening last night, you were talking about, and some animals, what is the animals that would be caught? And it seemed to be that you brought up beaver a lot. So beaver to be the one nuisance animal that can cause problems. So you're feeling that the beaver really, out of all the animals and trapping, is the one tool that you need to.
Well, I wouldn't say that's the only, I think that other species, if they become too abundant, they can become nuisance species, like coyotes. If they become really abundant and they become habituated to humans, they can cause problems, like, showing up in your backyard, attacking your pets. It does happen. So I'm not going to say that the beaver is the only species that requires management, but it's just the one that has thus far, I think, probably been the most impactful to human infrastructure. And I mean, we've seen just the direct impacts of an overabundant beaver population.
And for coyotes, I've read a lot of information on this, is that maybe the increase in population is because of trapping and killing. When they're a pack, male alpha are the ones that have the pups, and the other ones are kind of a supportive community. And once you kill that alpha, male or female, that explodes the population. Then the other offspring can start having children as well, or pups. So that's a tough one. And I think a lot of some of the other animals, as skunk and raccoon and fox, bear, nuisance animals, if they show up at someone's home, bobcat, people are probably going to take it into their own hands or hire a professional on their own. In Williston, there's a lot of developments and things. I think someone would be calling an exterminator if they had a problem. So, but anyway, so I think that it sounds like there's going to be a lot more discussion on the topic. Oh, I had one question. You just took it down. What was the list of properties there? What was the Marshall Blueberry parcel? Let's see.
That's a parcel off of Marshall Avenue. It's a blueberry swamp. It's wetlands. It's pretty small. I think it's like 10 acres.
And the Burnett property? 10 acres. And the Burnett property?
That is a 50-acre parcel south of 89. That's like at the end of Nob Hill Road.
Okay.
I recall from years ago when we acquired that blueberry parcel, it was considered at that time to be the most northernmost occurrence of that particular species of blueberry, or type of blueberry, which was the interest in.
Melinda, do you think that the select board looking at permits on a case-by-case basis is the best choice of those? I
guess that's what I would recommend. I think it's a waste of resources to post all the lands. And I think that trapping on an emergency basis only is problematic because, because would, basically people could be trapping out of season, and that's wasteful. The resources are wasted, and we have less control over the kind of traps that are used in an emergency situation. To me, it would be better, for example, if we were trying to control beaver population, would be to try to manage it before it becomes an emergency, and to perhaps hire a trapper to, trap during the winter. And, I think it would cost the town very little or nothing to do that. And it would manage the population in a proactive manner. And it could be done safely so that people and their pets were not at risk, because those traps are all underwater.
Another thought I had too was that this is only town land that we're talking about. And I think the one person that spoke last night, I think, was confused that I think they thought we were talking about all land in Williston.
Yeah.
Town-owned land compared to the whole, all the private land is fairly small. And if trapping is allowed on other private land, the control, I mean, a bobcat has a range of 30 miles and a coyote has a range of, 100 miles or whatever, acres. So it's not as if the population, just by restricting trapping on town land, is to affect trapping in general, because they can trap on private land. That's not being affected at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I see Reed's asking how many people do trap, and that's a question I had maybe, later on down the road. What is the population of trappers here in Williston?
I would say probably not very many people. I just haven't heard much about that. And I think the last time I heard about, before the Mahan incident, the last time I heard about a trap was like a few years ago. So
except for the fox.
Yeah, 1 year ago there was one. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I don't think. Yeah.
The only thing I wanted to say on this topic was that my experience I did not grow up hunting, but in recent decades there's been a gentleman who asked for permission to hunt on my father's land, on Chapin's land in Westford. And it was really nice to see that once he was given permission to hunt out there, we have had been able to collect a lot of information about what wildlife is there, because he would provide us with updates or pictures from his trail cams, from his game cameras. And when people showed up and were hunting without permission out there, he was able to let them know that it was by permission only, and report to us if there was a problem so we could take care of it. So there's that just opened my eyes recently to the value of engaging with hunters or trappers to manage intentionally and prevent activities that probably would take place regardless of policy, but it helps to have sort of like eyes on what's happening on the ground, having people with permission who can report when folks are doing stuff without permission.
Reed, do you post, or does Chapin post that land in Westford? Because permission is automatically granted for hunting unless property is posted.
Yeah, this was on posted land. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Shall we advance to the next topic on the staff update, which is Chatham Woods?
So I just wanted to let you know, because I believe you asked for a follow-up on this report of, the complaint and the administrative permit application you reviewed last time. So basically, there was no formal violation issued. There was, the zoning administrator said he would not be pursuing a formal enforcement action against the violation complaint. And, of course, that his determination of that can be appealed to the DRB. We don't know yet whether it's going to be appealed. But essentially, he's going to issue a permit for the removal of trees. And he's just asked that people continue to stay out of the wetlands and that the association continue to keep tabs on that. And that's pretty much it. Anybody have any questions about that?
Matt handled the whole thing very well.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing, the other bit of news that I wanted to share is that the VOREC, which is the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, looks like they may be getting a lot of money from the state for outdoor recreation and trails projects. They could, if this holds in the budget, they could get $5 million in grants available. And so this could be something that we may want to think of applying for. And I think it could be used for maintenance of existing infrastructure as well as expansion of trails and recreational facilities. So just wanted to let you know about that. It would be, they started this program a couple of years ago, and they so far have only contributed $300,000 towards trail and recreational projects statewide. So this would be a huge increase in the amount of money available.
It'd be like 15-fold.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but there's going to be an informational meeting about this later on this month, and I'm going to try to attend that.
Was this prompted by the increased use because of COVID, or was this already in the pipeline?
I think it was really, I think, yeah, I think so.
A new appreciation for access to recreation, to high quality recreation. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so with that, I think I want to move on to form-based code.
Excellent.
So, yeah, so I think what I'm going to do to start off is to give you guys an introduction, rather to play a video of Matt giving an introduction to form-based code. And then we're going to have Jeff get on and provide some more details about the project. But the idea of this is to get all of the citizen boards kind of at least familiar with the project, and so that they all have an opportunity to participate. And I see, hi, Jeff. Jeff is here. He says hello. So we'd like to give the citizen boards. You want to introduce yourself, Jeff?
Trying to find myself in the screen here. Hello, I'm Jeff Farrell. Not a morning.
Welcome.
And really pleased to meet you all. And also want to talk to you all. I've got some PowerPoint slides up and available. question of how deep we want to go. And I heard Melinda say she wanted to play an introduction by Matt. Is that right?
If you would like to, I can do that. Otherwise,
Well,
you know,
yes,
so-
do that, and then I can cut out or kind of short circuit any portions of mine that are redundant.
yeah, I mean, his does go on for a little bit, so I may play like 15 minutes of his intro, and I think that'll give folks enough of an intro, and then I'll hand it over to you. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay, so I will do that.
Terry,
Um,
were you on the commission when Matt came and originally announced that this was going to be an initiative and gave a talk on it?
No, I don't think I was, but I have sat in on the planning board presentation.
Okay.
for Form-based code, so
Have you all seen this already? Has he already given this to you?
Uh,
I wanna-
I've not seen this. Oh, this, not Matt's introduction.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I don't.
Matt came to gave us his spiel,
Oh,
form-based
But
code
it-
spiel to us a few months
but it-
ago, right?
Yeah, but it was at least 6 months ago that we had Matt here. But perhaps, Melinda, we should play it and just so that we're all starting from the same
okay.
place. Because I know if I were to try to regurgitate what Matt had come and walked us through about the reasons for it and the methodology, I probably could get most of it, but not all of it. So let's go ahead
Okay.
and play the intro
I can,
to make sure we start from the same base.
sure. I can play like 15 minutes of it. And if it seems like it's too basic or redundant, just give me a message in the chat and and I can stop it. Okay.
Yeah, everybody do that. If it seems like it's not worth our time, just write into the chat.
Yeah.
We won't tell
Okay.
Matt.
Can you all see the screen? Williston Growth Center form-based code.
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing is I'm not hearing any audio. Are we supposed to
Oh,
hear Matt's voice?
Hold on. You're not hearing it?
No, you may have to go to your share options and include your system audio.
Okay, hold on a second. Advanced. Share sound. Great. Okay, try this again.
Doing this project, answer questions, and
Okay.
then we can go over where we are in the process and what will be coming up this spring. So I think it's worth just noting, this is Taft Corners, this is 1937, Williston, largely farmland, and the intersection basically being the home of a couple of farms, no Interstate 89. And of course, here we are maybe a few years ago now with the introduction of the interstate exit and all of the growth and development that it has brought. Looks like we lost Scott and I got to let him back in. And, you know, Interstate 89 and its construction really was the catalyst for so much of what's happened in Williston ever since then. This is 1962. It's Oak Hill Road being turned into an overpass just outside of the village for the construction of the interstate. And, you know, as is often the case, you know, initially you build the highway, but the growth doesn't come right away. So here we are at Green Up Day, 1970. The caption of this photo said these were some sorority sisters from UVM picking up litter on the side of the highway. And in fact, the highway was so quiet, the governor was able to land his helicopter on it to go out and witness the proceedings. So just another point in time, and you can see behind those young women some of what would be Taft Corners today. I believe the barn in that picture is more or less the location of the fire station today. And, almost immediately, by the early 1970s and throughout the 1980s, plans for significant large development were submitted or dreamed about or thought about for Williston. This one shows the Maple Tree Place site as a traditional enclosed mall, and it ultimately evolved into the Pyramid Mall proposal that the town fought about so much in the 1970s and turned into the Maple Tree Place proposal that the town continued to battle about into the 1980s and mid 90s. And so a little bit of history there. The town was quite divided, but really trying to come to grips with its fate as a target for commercial and higher density residential development. And again, I would say, very much catalyzed by the fact that there was this highway exit bringing traffic in. And of course, over the years, lots and lots and lots of planning. I overlaid a number of different plans, dreams, sketches, ideas that Williston experienced over the years. Many of them pulling for a more compact or downtown-like environment. Many of them, most of them, envisioning some kind of a grid of streets that would be interconnected and provide people with ways to travel between the quadrants of Taft Corners without having to go through the main four-way intersection, which was perceived as congested and predicted to get much more congested. So we did a lot of planning. We got a lot of parking. One of the development standards that was heavily enforced through the years. There was a lot of concern. We're going to get all this development. What if there's not enough parking? So Williston, like many communities, had very traditional parking requirements, generating large numbers of required spaces. And so, the couple of the images here, one's an older Maple Tree Place plan, one's an aerial of a lot of Taft Corners. One is those percentages at Walmart and Home Depot are estimated percentage occupancy of the parking lots there. And they do get fuller than that sometimes, but almost never all the way full. And the picture that says east of Best Buy was taken at about 10:30 in the morning on a Black Friday a couple of years ago. So theoretically, one of the busiest shopping days of the year at the kind of store that has big Black Friday sales and yet still quite a bit of parking available. And, the reason I bring up parking when I'm talking about form-based code is a lot of form-based code tends to talk about where to put the buildings and how to de-emphasize the parking so it's not the first thing you see or experience from the street. And also may get away from hard numbers of required amounts of parking and focus more on the form of the buildings and the way the sites are laid out. So a couple things that Williston did in response to this growth pressure. One thing it did was a little bit about going with the flow. Williston was the first state designated growth center once there was state law that allowed such a thing to exist. This means that a boundary was set, which you can see in the dashed line on this map. And the town committed to making sure that at least 50% of new development in Williston over the 20-year lifespan of the growth center would take place within this boundary. In other words, it was a commitment to focus growth here in exchange for some state development requirement relief, and that the town also committed to invest heavily in the infrastructure in this area, i.e. that grid of streets, some of which you see in the heavy black and black dashed lines on this map. So Growth Center is a planning tool. It's a planning tool that exists in Vermont, and it's one that Williston is now, we're most of the way through our third 5-year cycle within that 20-year period. So we're coming up on 15 years of having this designation. And, in the town plan, there's some language here that I've highlighted about the growth center. One thing that we say is that we want it to be design conscious, pedestrian friendly, mixed use. So what does that mean? The buildings look good. It's a pleasant place to walk around in. There's a mix of residential and commercial uses. And we say development and redevelopment. And I'll come back to that because certainly some amount of redevelopment will be part of Williston's story in the future. And we also talk about for the growth center in the town plan that we'll continue to look for, are our zoning bylaws effective? Are they getting what we want? And primarily, are they getting us that design conscious, pedestrian friendly, mixed use development like we say we want here in the town plan? And in fact, the current town plan identifies the consideration of a form-based code for the growth center as a goal. So we say we want to think about using a tool that emphasizes the relationship between buildings and the street, and the relationship and form of buildings and their relationship to one another. So this is straight out of the adopted town plan. So if somebody, stops you in the grocery store and says, why is the town doing this form-based code thing? A really simple answer is because we said we would, but also because we said we would in a town plan that was the result of an extensive public process and conversation in and of itself. And so we're trying to meet the goals of the growth center as they already exist, concentrating new development in Williston in the growth center. In other words, not sprawling out up along our state highways, particularly into the more rural parts of town, that it will be design conscious and pedestrian friendly, that we will continue to build bridge streets, that this is the part of town where the town hopes to achieve its affordable housing goals, because those are easier to achieve when you have some amount of density. Meet the challenge of evolving retail and commercial real estate market. And this is the pictures that I have down below, how it started, how it's going. Normally, when your big box retail store starts becoming the sort of annual home of a temporary Halloween costume store or something like that, that means it's not really commanding premium rents anymore. You wouldn't build a building like a Circuit City so that you could rent it to Spirit Halloween for 6 weeks once a year. That's not how you would hope that things would go. And so when you start to see this in a community, the answer is in your future, you're either going to have buildings like this that sit empty, which has happened all over the country. And, there's a lot of examples of that. Or maybe a more hopeful view that some of these buildings and some of these sites might be able to evolve into something else that's more relevant for the future. And that's that idea of encouraging private investment and redevelopment. So one thing the town can do to help properties like this evolve as that demand for big box retail fades is to build up the environment around them, to invest in the roads and streets and infrastructure necessary for redevelopment, and to not let development leapfrog out away from this contained boundary of the growth center, but rather say, no, if you want something new and intense in Williston, it's got to be in the growth center. That might mean you need to go redevelop a property. And now how can we have the land development standards that will also encourage that redevelopment to happen in the direction we want it to go? So towns considering a form-based code. What is that? It's a type of zoning. It's not that different from what we do already with what I would call our performance standards or design guidelines. It is focused on the physical character of the new development. So more worried about what the building looks like and where it is on the site, less worried about the exact mix of uses or intensity of uses that happens inside it. This generally promotes mixed use. It can be designed to promote pedestrian-friendly development. And I think most important to me and everything I've perceived working in Williston over the last dozen years, it coordinates that development and site design with the planned streets and other infrastructure. So we start thinking about, we know that development is going to come in maybe one lot or one building at a time, but we know that we'll do better if we have a coordinated goal for a streetscape, because our streets are going to access more than one building. And that street is going to take on a sense of place of its own that will be better if there's coordination along it. Form-based codes are known for offering predictability. The standards tend to be standards that you either meet or you don't, and that are clear, illustrated, and easy to communicate so that citizens and developers all have a clear picture of the community's future. So these illustrations on the bottom, if you have an illustration in your form-based code like the one on the right that says in this place, This is where the buildings are going to be on the site. This is the bulk and mass of those buildings. That image may be also controlling the diversity of rooftops that's necessary, and maybe even the part of the street that needs to have building windows and entrances on it. All of that's a picture that you can point to in your bylaw and say, this is what we mean when we say this is what we want. And backing up a little bit, this diagram shows three things. It shows conventional zoning, design guidelines, and then form-based codes. And where are we right now? We're kind of in the middle with the design guidelines. We do still talk about use. If a big box store were to come to Williston, as Target did many years ago, and start trying to determine what the development standards were, they would find a standard that says one of the criteria you need to meet is to have a wrap of smaller stores around the big box, which is kind of what that middle drawing communicates. But that's literally the extent of the language you would find in the bylaw. So the picture there looks nice, but there might be other ways somebody would do that might not meet your expectations. And the struggle of the staff and sometimes the DRB is we kind of know what we think we want, but we've got to go back to those words. Form-based code adds pictures in a way that makes it really clear what the town's goals are. So the component.
I think I'm going to stop the presentation there.
That was a nice intro. Thanks, Melinda.
Sure. Jeff, would you like to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to enable that.
All right. And while we're doing that, it's always one of the things that the consultant team is really excited about in this process was demonstrated by that show, which was, I would say, I do this kind of thing and talk about form-based codes as a profession, and I just got schooled by Matt on a really good presentation, and some of it just I could not do the great explanation of what's happened in the history, how that came in. I've seen a lot of those documents. I have a gross notion, but that's great. We're all excited about working here. The design problem, and I mean, technically it's a difficult project, but, and I'm not trying to just get on your good side by saying this, but you all are a really good client in that you're so far along in talking about this. You have this in the town plan, et cetera. So I will say I'm excited. The other thing I will say is I'm trying to tailor this to you all. And of course I don't know you all. So let me know if I'm going on too long. I tend to talk pretty quickly and show a lot of images. We can always come back to them if I go over something too quickly. But I want to give you an exposure to, and tell me if this is right. First, our view, big picture, which is about conservation. Second is our process, because the big idea behind a form-based code is, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, it has to be based on a community vision, a shared community vision. That enables all sorts of other things. Besides, it's just the right thing to do to have some political agreement and a conversation about it. But if it's a shared community vision and master plan, people generally agree about where you want to go. You can do things. You can make it easier for someone who's going to build something that you want. Some approvals can be administrative because they fit the rules. And the form-based code needs to be fit to the vision, somewhat like a hand in glove. And that's what I'm going to stress. The first part, it's really a two-part exercise, big picture. One is getting the community master plan tight. And we're not going to reinvent the wheel, but we want to come in and kind of some combination of freshen it up and focus it so that we can write the rules based on that. And people will be feeling good about that. Now, are you seeing my slide sorter here? Okay.
we're seeing the slide sorter, but not seeing the slides large enough to see them. There we go.
Okay, it's
Thank
sometimes
you.
a mystery which screen it's going to come up on. And let me get rid of the chat. I don't think you need that. I'd invite you all to, don't be afraid to interrupt me. And this is the big deal for us. We also need the rules to be clear and concise so that a layperson as well as a builder, developer can look at them and understand what they mean with a little explanation, but I'd say quite a bit different than most. All right. Where's my, okay. First point, at Williston, we have to keep reminding ourselves that Williston is bigger than Taft Corners as outsiders, but that's an important point. I want to suggest that what we're doing in Taft Corners is about a partnership between the city and the countryside by having, here's a little bit of a bird's eye view. And by in this one spot, and that's actually a little bigger than the buildings are able to go on, but by developing compact, relatively intense development in this one spot, we take the pressure off of the rest and help keep it green. I'd suggest there's a real partnership between a real city and the countryside, and the suburb is kind of the enemy of both. Nothing eats up land like suburban sprawl development. And that's the biggest, you could fill up Williston in just a few years with, you know, 1 per acre or even 1 per 3 or 5 acre development. And there's pretty much no taking it back once that happens. Also point out that there's some areas in the targeted growth area where there's just not going to be any growth. There are going to be pockets of green because of wetlands, wildlife corridors, streams. And of course, as an urban designer, I'll use the word urban, which to me is not a bad word. It means good things. Those are opportunities to look at them as beautiful places. Those can be amenities. Those streams, those can be small parks. And instead of turning the buildings rear end to those places, you front them because they're beautiful opportunities, and you try and team up with them. And we've got plenty of information. And I'm going to jump now into the process. The first idea is we push for a big public process. We can't have this many people in a room anymore, not for maybe a year or so. So this goes online, but we engage the people. We want also ask you to bring people in, people who don't normally participate. You'll tend to always get the usual suspects, but we want to get people who aren't involved, but nonetheless live here and care. They just don't devote themselves to going to planning meetings. This, we call it a charrette or a public planning workshop. It's a combination. It's all about getting that shared community vision. And there's a little bit of education involved. We show a lot of images of other places that have done a similar thing successfully and what that looks like. And we also present the issues. On our team, we have a really good urban economist. This is a woman we've been working with for, a couple of decades, who understands kind of urban and new urban market economics and what that means for what can be built here, what the market can absorb, how fast it can go. Second, we also have a traffic engineer who is, I've been working with him for 3 decades, showing my age. And he understands the difference between roads and streets. Streets as walkable places that are actually positive to be on, as opposed to roads, which if you're not driving on them, they're pretty uncomfortable. So it's we have a pretty full-bodied team. And the thing we do in this public workshop is there's kind of like, and this all gets transferred to Zoom. which has actually some advantages, but I won't lie to you. It's not as good as if we could all be in the same room together. But in this public process, we take the big group, the room full of as many people as we get, 50 to 100 to 200. But we quickly break up into smaller groups and we mix people up. So we don't have everybody from the Conservation Commission at one table. We would mix you up, and we'll do this in the Zoom. So you'd be with, we want to have, to put it a little bit of a cartoon, in a cartoon way. You can imagine the pro-growth, the anti-growth people. We mix them up so they have to talk to one another. And at these small groups, which will be a small Zoom meeting, we ask people to talk about the things they like, the things they don't. We won't have you at a table with Taft corners down on the table and for you to draw on it. We will have that in a Zoom meeting. And there'll be a couple of facilitators there. The idea here is that people work in small groups. There's a facilitator leading you through so the table doesn't miss any big issues. And in this COVID environment on Zoom, you'll be talking about specific things. There'll be an aerial map, aerial view of the site that's very sharp. We can zoom in if we need to. And people tell us specific things and we write it down or draw it on the map. And some of those things, this is from a project we just did in Iowa. That's lower right corner is the University of Northern Iowa. Probably don't have any alumni here. So there are all sorts of really specific things. The street is too wide. Sidewalks narrow in business district, streets, no place to sit, problems, and also aspirations. People tell us what they want. Now, see if I can get that to go backwards. After the small groups, and this is really a critical point, people are working in these small groups and we bring them back together. This will be in the big Zoom room, not like this, this example. And we talk to them, each group has a little presentation and they talk about, well, here are our 3 or our 5 big ideas that we want to see in Taft's Corners. And it involves things we don't want, things we do want. And what happens, and I've done this more than 30 times, this not Zoom, but this technique is people find out very quickly as they even move to the second group at a basic level, how much they agree upon. Now, this is going to be reaffirming, I think, a lot of things in the plan, but that agreement, that common understanding gets freshened up, and that's what we have to build a plan on. So we bring people back together, they see what they agree upon. Then the consultant team, if it weren't for COVID, we'd be up there in some space that people could drop in anytime and see us. But we go back to Zoom where we're for about the next 5 or 6 days. We have a kind of a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Zoom room open where we talk to one another. We talk to one another and work through things as a team. And this is definitely involves what I'd call technical meetings. Technical is not really the right term, but we bring in property owners, big property owners. If you have property in here, we'll probably be talking to you. Unless if you have a townhouse in Finney's Crossing, we might not, because we're not going to move your townhouse. But for people we're talking about doing a design or putting a street grid on their property, we talk to them so they understand how it can benefit them. We work with them. We also, and another important point, we bring in all the technical people. So the first phase, first part of this is we get an idea where the community wants to go and we start drawing that. And then we bring in the technicians, the highway people. We're going to see if we can get V-Trans in there, but definitely the town, utilities. We'll talk about how big your sewer pipes are, figuratively, not literally, but what they can handle. So we try and have the vision and then talk to the technicians to see how we can make it work instead of the other way around. In this particular image, it's a funny one, besides me being a little bit younger there, not having so much white. But sitting around the table, we have the counties, in this case, Northern Virginia, the bike and pedestrian planner in the blue check shirt. The woman is the WMATA rep, the transit rep. The blue shirt, silver hair, you're looking at his back. He's the head of Department of Public Works. And the consultant on the far right with the tie, he's a transportation engineer working for the county. He's a consultant. They were starting to do a plan for the big street we're working on, which, by the way, was a state highway running right through the middle of where they wanted to have a main street. Kind of a similar situation. And here's an example of that kind of thing, just focused on market inputs, the economics we think about and deal with. We also do this for transportation, et cetera. So it's a fairly rigorous, but also holistic test that we run through to make this a real master plan that is rooted in what the citizens want. At the end of this week, we have another big meeting, and we come back and we call it the work in progress presentation. And we're really asking the question, did we get it right? And we'll show images like these, development scenarios, massing models. We really look at things like, what do we do with the parking? How can you build a building, and where do you put the parking, and different scenarios. These are a little on the, actually some of those on the right are probably in the order of Taft's Corners. Also some simple hand drawings. This is an old neighborhood center in Peoria, Illinois, that had gone to pot, so to speak. If you look at this drawing, and simple drawings showing how that can transform with public infrastructure, street trees, and then private sector building new buildings. It's a real partnership. The plan drawing on the right shows the mix of new buildings and the existing buildings being the lighter color. We also do photo transformations. I think this drawing was interesting. It might look like, and let me go backwards here, see if I can freeze it. I picked this one because I thought the before looked a little bit like parts of Taft's Corners, where you've got parking lots and, one-story commercial buildings, but you start to rebuild it. And it's a combination of the public investment and changing the rules is a big incentive for private sector development, having a master plan that's coherent. And it seems you have demand there. So you can take a place that looks pretty sad. It can be changed, and you can have a place. This is an urban place that people want to be. I have a feeling none of you, except maybe Phoenix Crossings, none of you probably live in Taft's Corners, or else you'd be, I don't know, behind the Home Depot or something, because it's, or in your car. But can you imagine that transformed to a place that you'd actually like to maybe drive into, or if good weather, bicycle into? And I don't know, it's across the street, that liquor, beer, and wine, that's because there's a specific property owner there that we were showing how he could evolve his business. But you would come in and get, if you want to have a cup of coffee or see a movie, or come with kids and go to one of the parks or civic greens that's just behind these buildings along one of the streams, and then go home, or you come down here and buy something at the Home Depot, which is probably gonna remain. They're one of the retailers, one of the big boxes that seems to be a survivor. And enjoy this environment as long as you want, and then go home. So you have that city, the good city and the good rural partnership, sort of, or not. Now, the kind of plans we come up with, this is Obviously not Taft's Corners, but this is an illustrative plan. Happens to be for a little river town in Iowa. The black buildings were the existing. So we don't have a lot of buildings here. Well, there are a fair amount of buildings in Taft's Corners. But unlike the old Main Street of Cedar Falls, a lot of these buildings here are kind of, they're barely buildings. No one's going to chain themselves to any buildings in Taft's Corners because they want to save the building. You know, they're it's just business. So when it makes economic sense, when it pencils out, as they say, for somebody to redevelop and do one of these new buildings at mixed use in the new environment, it can happen relatively quickly. But back to points. But we do have a lot of tough work with what's existing there, the property lines, the property ownership, the streets that are there. So it's a design problem. And by the way, at that work in progress event, here's what we want to have happen if we've done our job right. And we do a little survey. We ask people if we're on track or not. But if we've done our job right, the citizens and the stakeholders all have this feeling that they have some investment there. And now we can write those development regulations because we've got a master plan. It's like the plans you have now, but a little bit tightened up and focused, and we start to fit codes to them. And a little bit of an abstract graphic, but here's that town. And then here's the version of the zoning code that we did for it. We put the signal colors, the indicator of what you can do with your building in the street, because that's the main thing we're creating is the public street. So one property on one side of the street has the same rules generally as on the other side. Because if you're on your bicycle or driving down the street or walking, that's a whole environment. So as a rule, you want both sides of the street to agree. And tied to this regulating plan, we have specific rules about the building's physical form and function, etc. Now, at this point, I want to ask you all, I have a few more slides to go where I run through the seven chapters of a form-based code. It's a little geeky, so I love it, but it talks about, the introduction, the regulating plan chapter, the building form standards, the architectural standards, and I can go through it pretty fast, but I have a question. Do you all want to see that?
So I guess my only question for you, Jeff, before saying yes from my perspective is what is there a trade-off? Are there other things we would use time to talk through if we didn't do that?
Yeah, I mean, the alternative would be to just go straight to questions. If I've said something, if you've got a fear or you've heard a rumor about something, that'd be a good time to go for it. And I'm not, where's my time? I should have put a big clock in front of myself.
We're at 17 after, so we've got maximum about 40 minutes remaining.
I think I could be through this in 10 minutes. If your head spins, we can go back, or you can ask a question about it. All right.
Eric?
I, for one, would be happy to give it another 10 minutes. I think I see where Jeff is going, and I'm curious to hear some of these details.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
By the way, what you see in front of you, I just kind of realized it's got a maximum 10 stories. Probably not Taft's Corners. And actually, most of the places we work, they tend to not. That was unusual. Looking back, they tend to not go above. 5 actually, because the building type changes. So if you go above 5 stories, doesn't make much sense. introduction, not very exciting, although we have a how to use the code in chapter. The regulating plan is something that it's really about if somebody's going to try and change something, they want to come in. We make it difficult to change the plan. You have to do a rezoning, and it's a couple of notches higher to change that than it would be to just change your zone, because this plan is like a piece that's really interlocked. So it's not just the people across the street or adjacent to you who'd have to be notified. It's a little bit bigger deal. So if somebody wants to come in and said, no, I don't want to do that, I want to do this, like a developer, it's a little bit harder. The building form standards, this is very important because these are the rules for what you can do in 3 dimensions. The physical form, and it talks in a really gross way about the functions. And we deal with, wait a minute, let me go back here. Well, that on the top, it's a combination of what I call dumb diagrams and simple text for the building's height, its siding or its placement, the elements, like think of a front porch or a balcony, and then the uses. And form-based codes use really broad uses, so it's a lot more flexible, less administration. And I call them dumb diagrams because if we do it right, they're actually pretty smart. In both the text and the diagrams, the idea is you don't want to give an attorney or an architect, because architects are, I'm educated as one, are really creative with their use of language. So they can tell you that, you know, a grid is a pattern on somebody's shirt or some imaginary set of lines related to the datum of Mecca or Paris or something. So you would really boil it down so you keep it out of the attorney's office. And we have different frontages because of different characters of streets. There might be a workplace or a tech shop, town frontage, residential of a medium scale, et cetera. Actually, I should talk more about that. The different frontages are talking about different intensities. You can imagine there might be I call it like a classic American Main Street environment, shops on the ground floor, people live or work upstairs. It's fairly intense. That's where you want that concentration of retail there to work. And then the body of Taft's Corners might be a place where the buildings have rules, but the uses are very flexible. So it's more market determined. So people could build housing, condominiums or apartments, office buildings. We do keep retail on the ground floor because it only makes sense in Hong Kong or some parts of Manhattan or something. When retail starts to get up in the second floor, that doesn't really make sense unless you're in Hong Kong or someplace like that. And then in most cities, there's significant parts of the city that may not have retail. All good cities are not retail on the ground floor, something else above. That's too much retail. And by the way, America has too much retail and has had it for a long time. The public realm standards, this is where we get that streetscape right. It's about both. There might be a small green area in front of a building or not, but there's also the streetscape itself. And important concept, and Matt talked about this in excuse me. In a good urban area, the public space is the street, and we've really got to get that right. And I'm trying to remember some of the stores, but frankly, there's a good example of why this is so important along 2A. There's a section of stores where they built and they did their darndest to build an American Main Street on one side of this big highway. And it's got the shop front windows and the fronts in it. But instead of sitting on a 2 or 3 lane street with, wide sidewalks and another set of storefronts across the way. It's sitting on his highway. And it just doesn't work. It looks so incredibly out of place. The street itself is a place, and you've got to have, in most cases, vast majority, you've got to have cars, but really corralled, slow speed, on-street parking, so you've got narrow lanes relatively, so the cars go slow, on-street parking, which slows the cars and makes the pedestrians more comfort. A wide enough area so when you plant a tree, it will get big, it will grow and thrive and not die in 7 years because you put it in a crypt. And then a good wide sidewalk. And in some places, you might do a really wide sidewalk because you're setting it up an area that sidewalk cafes would work. And then the buildings. Think about the buildings like the walls of a room. It's a big outdoor room. That space is critical. And then there are also public spaces, squares and greens. The natural ones, we don't code. Mother Nature does that. But where we're making squares and greens where a lot of people are going to be walking, we do to keep it an open, visible, usable public space. And in general for public space, I like the mantra, keep it simple and let people invent whatever they want to do there. The architectural standards, there are a lot of chapters to this, but this is where I call it the dress code in a way. It's overly simplistic, but note I'm wearing a bow tie. I could have on a long tie or no tie or t-shirt, or I don't know, it's cold in here. I could have on a parka. But the dress code is where you get into character of a place. And this is important. We've had people talk to us about the character of Vermont being small wood. But when we start to really push and talk to people about the cities in Vermont and the building materials, we're talking about slate and granite and things like that. And this is not an easy thing to do, but we want to wrestle with this palette of materials and proportions so that you don't get buildings here that look like you're in California or Texas or something like that. And that's not an easy thing to do. I've been doing that all my life, but it's not. Some people will tell you it is. I'd say they don't know what they're talking about, to be honest. Now, this is a little visualization. The way we write these, and you're a municipality, but we want to make the building look decent, but it's about function. This is not Taft's Corners, by the way, but maybe it could be. But we don't write the architectural standards, and I don't think a municipality can. So they reinforce a style. It's got to be a little more broad than that. And the issue would be here. These buildings have a different aesthetic. At the same time, I think they kind of fit together. And the issue would be they both function really well as a city. And the little variations are what make it real, as opposed to being a gated community or a Disney World. And when I looked at that this morning, I thought, well, that's too intense for Taft's Corners. Well, maybe not in one spot. And the light rail, that's going to be a ways in the future, but you can certainly plan for it now. I'm an optimist about that. And you plan the same way, even if you're not going to have rail. It's Taft, a compact development just makes sense for walking, for bicycling, and whether your transit system is may start out as being a bus or small vans that circulate, but this is the kind of development that actually helps transit work. Parking is a killer. Have you ever heard of a guy named Don Shoup? You might Google Don Shoup, S-H-O-U-P. He wrote a book called The High Cost of Parking. And he's got, I'm going to find a particular one of his videos to put up. He's the first one who's kind of gotten a name for himself, but pointing out that the way we did our parking requirements is a little bit, if anyone's from New Orleans and a practitioner of voodoo, I'm going to insult you now by saying it's kind of voodoo. It really, and actually that would be a bad insult. It doesn't really make sense. These numbers and things that we treat like they're scientific, they're really not. They start to be scientific if you lived in a kind of theoretical, completely suburban world where everything is apart, and therefore your car has a parking space where you would buy groceries, where you would sleep, where you go to work, where you go to vote, where you go to play. And that's kind of the way we've been building our society. That's why Taft Corners looks the way it does. Too much parking. The building you see here as an example of, you know, at some point in the future, we might not have very much parking because of rideshare, et cetera. But we're going to have to deal with it. This is a building in Northern Virginia, Arlington County, where it's dealt with pretty well. And this is a mediocre parking structure that the county built. It's a mediocre parking structure because it's not as coldly efficient for parking cars as it could have been, because they were smart. They sort of sacrificed the efficiency. This ground floor in a very intense area is all retail. And then there's a sign right there that says park. So the upper floors are parking, and I think there might be a little bit of parking in the middle of the block, but they didn't kill. If this was an open parking garage, if those upper windows were on the ground floor, this would be one little spot in the middle of their town center that was sucking the life off the street. Right now, at night, maybe during the day, I think, you know, on the weekend, thousands of people walk by this and don't realize they're by a parking structure. And that's kind of the way you have to do it. Put it behind the buildings, put it above the buildings, put it maybe in the basement, but going deep is a real problem. And then the uses, I like to show this. I'm proud of this because this is the smallest use table you've ever seen. Form-based codes, we don't want to make you go back and fill out any forms if you're going to change your coffee shop to a bookstore, et cetera. We want to make it so form-based codes might say the upper floors of this building can be not retail, but they can be any kind of commercial or residential. So it's really broad categories. Try and let the market work. Most of the time, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally, really broad categories. There's liable to be a section of street, and we're careful about this because the world has too much retail, where you'd say this is where we want our pedestrian-oriented main street to be. So there might be 600 or 800 feet that we would say these ground floors need to be. You have to build a storefront. But so that's an example of a form-based code being use specific. We like to keep it simple. And finally, because we're dealing with physical form, there are some words that we use in an unusual way, and we're very precise about it. So we have, when we use those terms in the code, we put them in small caps, and we're very specific about their definition. So when we say, you know, block corner or block, people can figure out exactly what we're talking about and not confuse it with a children's game. All right. Administration, and I'm done. But if you have the community support and people buy the master plan, buy the rules, then administrative for when somebody's going by the rules, grease the skids, get them building as quickly as possible. And somebody wants to do something against the rules out of the box, then we're going to have to talk about it. That was probably more than 10 minutes, wasn't it?
Not much, 15,
Oh,
20 minutes. That's okay. Thank you for that.
I see.
Any questions?
Oh, Donald Shoup visited Williston.
Potentially possible, I'm making that up, but I'm pretty sure he did a year or two ago on a walking tour.
Oh, hello.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
That's another example of why we like being here. You know, that's first rate.
I'm just gonna, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Melinda.
Oh, I was just gonna
All
jump
right,
in
well-
and I was just gonna jump in and introduce Regina from CCRPC. CCRPC has largely funded this project through their Unified Work Plan program. And they're managing the consultants for the town of Williston. They're working with the consultants. That's all.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Regina.
Welcome.
Go ahead, Eric.
Thanks, Reed. First of all, Jeff, I just want to say thanks for that presentation. It was very helpful, and it was a nice compliment to the one that we had from Matt as well. You may have said this at the beginning of your presentation, and I just missed that. I'm just wondering, what is the time frame for your study? And I don't know if either you or Melinda can answer this, but what is the presumably, if Matt's pushing this, presumably this is the direction the town will end up going, and what's the time frame for implementation of this approach of the form-based code?
The first big, the next big, the big event of having the big public planning process, we don't have a specific time set, but we're looking at the last week in March or the first week in April. And that would be the big, about a week plus of a lot of meetings. The things, by the way, things we ask the citizens to come to, it's not a week long. It's really focused on one day for the big, you know, roll up your sleeves, and we're going to ask you what you want and don't want that planning event. And then about a week later-ish, we're going to ask everybody to come back to their computers, do the work in progress. And the time after that is, I'm having trouble bringing that to mind. It's a pretty quick process. We come back. It's Regina, do you have that time right on top of your head?
It took me all this time to find it, but I've just got it open now. So let me get down to the.
At that point, it's like within a year, you can have rules, and that is for this amount of change, that's really fast. But that's kind of what it should be.
Yeah, so it looks like December 2021, essentially. So really working through the rest of this calendar year.
And the first big node of that, or the first big event, I guess, the phase is the getting the vision plan, getting people to agree upon it. And that's literally a plan and a lot of images kind of showing what the envisioned character and intensity of development is in different parts of that plan. And by the way, when we do that, we throw in, we will include in that vision plan information about the really simple things, but I call it the skeleton, or I don't want to mix, I started to say guts. That's a incredibly contradictory
Mixed metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah, the most important parts, the big parts of what the code, the regulations would say, like, for example, in a certain area, we talk about, you know, the buildings, we're talking about maximum height of X, or minimum height of X, maximum height of Y, and the functions, you know, functions and character. I keep coming back to the Main Street environment. You know, storefronts and residences or offices above. Another area would be, you know, so we'll talk about things like how tall the buildings can be, things like, are the buildings paved right up to the building like they would be in a Main Street environment, or is there a dooryard or small front yard? Little character things like that. And we don't talk about density as such, but it's very much implied. So we're talking about a, you know, residential area of 2 to 3 stories. You kind of get a sense of what the place is going to be like.
I have a question for you, Jeff, and it centers around the main focus of our work here with the Conservation Commission. And a lot of what we're doing is determining whether there are conservation impacts to new development. And as we think about the growth center and defining form-based code that's going to govern how it develops, in your experience with other places, are rules about things like buffers and impervious surface areas, or you know, those sorts of rules, do they continue to hold true even with the form-based code layer on top of it? Are there times that it is revisited because of questions about, you know, should we compromise in some areas here in exchange for more conservation elsewhere in town? What's your experience with that?
That's a good question. And the answer is I would strongly argue that you should consider the whole big picture. And like my opening statement, the intense development here saves the rest of the green. Doesn't mean you forget about it and don't let us you know, create flash flood conditions because it's all impervious surface, and you know, we wipe out the streams. But it's a different context. So the kind of stormwater management issues, et cetera, you do are different. And I have I don't have it at hand, but there's an interesting graph someone did, a like-minded person. So I'll be honest about that. But looking at looking in a compact development like this, or the amount of runoff or the environmental issue or something like that in a compact development per capita is actually pretty low because the people are concentrated and vertical. But the word is urban. In an urban context, and so many people react to that because they think it means all the bad things when they go into a big city. But in an urban context, you do things pervious, and yes, pervious pavement is a good thing to do regardless. But you also will do things like green roofs, try and capture stormwater. What you don't do is you don't have each development handle their own stormwater independently, because then you get these pits / ponds around. You see how you can handle that in a coordinated manner. So if you were really just looking at an individual building, I think, yeah, a building here, a building that's in the middle of this compact intense development would be less good. Don't quote me on that. It's a bad choice of words, but less good than what somebody could do on 5 acres. But it's but in balance, it's actually I'd say a greatly more ecological way to develop. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, and sorry, Gary, but one last point. Reed mentioned buffers. Part of this code, it's going to be based on a plan. So we will have drawings that talk about how we're going to literally map where the edge is. So it might be a street running along a stream, So you can see exactly where the edge of that street is or that building, and then where the stream is. So where we make the transition, say, from a tree-lined sidewalk to the natural topography. So we won't be coding buffers and saying, if you're going to build, you have to have a certain amount of a setback. That'll be given and inherent in the plan. So it's kind of like Matt mentioned, you can figure out utilities and things because you see it ahead of time. So we can wrestle with that stuff before the first building comes to you. It's a very front-loaded planning process.
Go ahead, Gary.
I just had a question about whether you've run across other rules. Like I'm thinking, can we say we want a minimum of LEED silver architecture in this, and that would help us reduce water use and other resources, maybe reduce the amount of resources the town has to get into for upgrading sewer or upgrading water supplies?
Yep.
Okay,
I'm a consultant. It's illegal to give a one-word answer. So I have to add to that. An interesting thing, and Regina's a really good person to have here. We worked on the form-based code for Winooski with Regina, who is, I'll say, is a tough client. She's very thorough, but in that code we talked about having, and we do have, there's kind of we were giving a little bonus. In form-based codes, bonuses are tricky. You don't want to give, you want to build everything in, but there's some things you'd give a little bonus to. And we offered, that code offers a bonus both for, and I don't remember the specific techniques of the here, but energy efficiency and affordable housing. And it turned out that as I have heard it a couple times now, everybody was building the energy efficiency anyway, so they kind of automatically got the bonus. So that might that's something to talk about. Are they going to do it anyway? Do we need to incentivize it? Or maybe
well, I think we're kind of at a point where let's push them farther. Let's we can all do pretty efficient buildings, but
that's what I was going to say, Gary. Is maybe the problem's not efficiency or not efficiency, it's what level of efficiency.
Yeah. Or, make it's a little tough in the beginning, but if you require that, it'll pay off in the long run for everybody.
Question, would you require that? I would sort of say you shouldn't. There's an argument that you don't make it tougher to build here than you do elsewhere. So if you're going to have a high efficiency requirement, shouldn't that be applied town-wide?
Oh, it could be, yeah. But I think actually cost-wise, if you do it right, nowadays it's minimally more expensive to build a very efficient building. I mean, beyond code. Because you can prove easily the payback on much of that stuff is relatively short-term and end up saving money in the long run.
And all the materials industry is.
Yeah, they're moving that.
That makes sense to you, Regina?
Yeah, I think that's a great point about the right balance there and trying to figure out how to hold things to a higher standard in the form-based code district. And partially though, if you look at it as something that is an incentive-based bonus, that can offset that concept a little bit. But yeah, it's a great point and something to think about. And in Winooski, that was adopted 2014, I think, 2015. And the state had yet to sort of step up to the stretch code, sorry. So now we're at that stage, and that target keeps sort of moving at the state level as well. So if we were to put something in this code, we would want to just be aware that we would want to probably keep on top of that to always have it be higher if that's what the intent.
Right.
If that's what the
Yeah,
intent is.
I think if we do it right, the incentive can be future energy savings, and therefore, I mean, it's proven that you can demand a little more for renting of spaces like that, and so it's a plus for builders and users of the buildings.
Oh, go ahead, Regina.
Sorry, just an interesting question, Gary. Also, you said wastewater. So that's interesting. And where the authority sits with that is something we can kind of think through because it's currently you have to get the state wastewater and water supply permit. And so it's sort of some of those specifics are within their realm as opposed to what we would put in the local zoning regulations.
Yeah, that might be a little more complicated, but I think it would pay for all of us. Even, we had a situation, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago where we were ready to upgrade our sewer capabilities in town. And many of us argued, let's step back and be more efficient. And if we can be more efficient, we don't have to pay those hundreds of millions or whatever, millions of dollars to upgrade our capabilities. Yeah.
Yeah. Great point.
I had one comment and one question. My comment real quick, Jeff, was when you mentioned green roofs, that makes me really happy, that idea, in part, not just because of the stormwater issues, but also because of the reduction in heat. Anytime I think about an area moving from more of a rural or suburban landscape to an urban landscape, I think about the heat and how much hotter those urban landscapes can be. Obviously, parks and street trees make a huge difference, but green roofs is also something that makes an area, a place comfortable, someplace that people want to go and want to gather. And then my question was whether, as you work with town staff, how does the town's new energy plan that was adopted this past year, how does that, is there any of that that's going to be pulled into the growth management, the form-based code work?
I'm sure it is, but I can't really address any particulars, but that's going to happen. And pretty much when you, any question that begins with, are you going to work with town staff? There's an automatic yes. And yeah, we should be doing that. It's kind of I'm about 5'6.5" these days, but a basketball term, it's kind of a layup that you do that. This kind of development is so good, and this might be some different kinds of energy, but just it enables so many other things. And there's a certain energy efficiency in the building form of a multi-story building where you have people. I'm speaking
less
to
surface area, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm speaking to you now, by the way, from a townhouse in Washington, D.C. So I'm on the end, so I've only got one common wall that's behind you all. But that my neighbor on the other side of that wall, who's on both sides, his heating and cooling bills are always like half of mine. So it does work. And townhouses are actually a great single family attached building type.
Then Melinda, then I guess my question is a little bit more for you as you talk with different staff about how to engage on the form-based code stuff. We don't have an energy coordinator yet. So
Yeah,
we don't have a staff person to advocate for inclusion of that. So I'm going to be looking for staff to try to fill that gap and make sure that it's being considered. Without somebody to advocate for it, it's easy for it to be lower priority, even if it's paid attention to. So that's just a concern I personally have.
Yes, good point. Yep. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be doing that moving forward. I have a question. Well, let me, there was a question in the chat from Reed Willis, and she says, part of the charm of a naturally evolved area is the mix of architecture, age, and style of buildings. Is there a risk that form-based code leads to an area looking too uniform, too planned?
Yes. And that's a good question, and I can't give the one word answer. It is, there's a risk, and that's something that we have to be on the lookout for, and we have to be sneaky and upfront at the same time about trying to prevent it. There's the factor that we try and write these codes to really enable a small developer, but you can imagine there's some big swaths of property out there under a single ownership, and things get built these days too often by big developers. Some of that is because I think the way our development process goes, it's hard to develop otherwise, but we try and allow small scale developer, because the code's straightforward and they just fit their building in. But with a big scale development, we try and if beyond a certain size, we have rules that make a developer break the scale down. I'll be honest with you, that's a little bit like when you're younger and you're able to walk on your hands. You can do it, but it's tough. So, and that's something I've been wrestling with since probably 1980 something, in working for other people and myself. And then there also, I'm just telling, read all the negative things about this that make it harder. This is going to be brand new development. You know, all the materials are going to be shiny. If you know what I mean, they're new, and they're coming out of a building materials industry that is an industry, and you know, things are put up fast, and so there are all these things that are stacked. I'd say stacked against us, and so we have to do things in the architectural code. We try and make sure to break down the scale of the larger buildings. We try and have vertical proportions. We have, you know, maximum size of a piece of glass in a window, so that you don't get this, you know, industrial size glass that you can walk through. And we try and have some variation. So as you walk down a street, it doesn't look like you're walking by an aircraft carrier, which, unless you've been standing next to one, they're even bigger than you can imagine. There are all these things that we have to do, and they're tough. It's just like, I don't want to understate it, but I'd have to say in most of the meetings we've had, there's been someone in the group who's asked a variation of that tough question. There was one, how can we keep everything from looking all the same? And I'd say it's really not so much the form-based code as a tool to work against that, but it's really about new development has that handicap that we have to work against. So any kind of new development, if it's conventional zoning, or even worse, if it's just one big development where they sometimes try and make it look alike, you know, like a Hawaiian theme, which is kind of a joke, but I've actually seen that in places far from Hawaii. So yeah, so the most I can tell you is we're very aware of that, and we're not sitting back on our heels. We're kind of on the balls of our feet, attacking it. And I'd say to all of you, and especially Reed, don't go away. The way this process is going to be set up, there'll be a lot of bites at the apple, a lot of conversations and talking about what we can do. And we want to do what we can. At a certain point, here's a point. It's a weird segue, but connected to Matt talked about predictability with the architecture or the character. There's an interesting thing. I think generally citizens and developers have different predictability they care about. A developer, it's business and they need it to pencil out. They want to have the predictability that they can develop. They can do the deal and have a profit that they know by the time they get to the end of the project, there is actually a profit. They want to do business. That's their predictability. The citizens, it's more about character and what you're going to see. So we can have both predictability, I think, for the citizens and flexibility that allows the developer to have his or her predictability. It's kind of a balance. So the developers, and they tend to be really like they're touching a hot stove when you want to talk about any kind of regulation or control. It's built in. It's like a prey species, sort of. They're always wary and on the lookout and reactive. So there'll be some conversations there with them when we're talking about things like how, their buildings are going to cost a little bit more by us being careful about the materials, trying to get some element, some percentage, some bits of, Vermont slate or really good equivalent synthetic, and brick and wood into the buildings.
So you worked with Winooski? Oh,
Yes.
yeah. And how did the developers do with the form-based code there? And maybe these might be some developers that might be developing in Williston.
That's a good question. I think they did fine. One thing I want, if you go over to Winooski, that code is written for Winooski. And I think, and Regina can clarify this. One thing I would point out, the architecture they got there doesn't have to be, that's not like this is form-based code architecture. I think that was, I think it's pretty much what Winooski wanted. There were some adjustments made to it. There were conversations about it. So you could get a different architecture, but yeah, you might get some developers, but I think there's enough going on in that area. And I have a narrow perspective on it with things going on in Burlington and South Burlington that I don't think you'll have trouble getting people who know the concept enough to come in and look. So you might have a number of developers, including Winooski folks.
Yeah, I would make that point as well. The process for developing the form-based code in Winooski definitely had a lot of conversation around the specific building materials, what you see on the outside of it, much like the dress code that, as Jeff refers to it. And that code is written that you can have some of the more modern building materials as opposed to more, I forget how you refer to these materials, Jeff, natural or
traditional, natural.
Yeah. Brick, other types of stone. So, you really, if you want to get to that level of detail in the form-based code, you can certainly do it. I will say that the developers in Winooski, I'm not sure quite what you mean by your question, Terry, in terms of how they're doing with it.
Are they receptive to it? Are they willing to work within the, I mean, if you go with the form-based code, I just was wondering if there was a lot of resistance or if it was difficult for them to make changes.
So I would say the majority of the developers that are doing stuff in Winooski were very much a part of the process. They were at the table from the beginning and really engaged right from the beginning. So they are fully on board over there. And, one of the things that's happening in Winooski that is helpful, but I'm going to be very clear, this is not a requirement in any way, shape, or form, but the majority of the form-based code area in Winooski is approved administratively. So Jeff described what the predictability that developers are looking for is basically just give me the clear pathway on how I get to yes. That is a very clear pathway in Winooski, and I would say that it's very much appreciated from the development community.
So did I get this right that that the whole process will start this March, did I hear? Or is it next March where this actually takes and the town starts working on it and includes the public?
No, it's next, it would be into March, first week of April that we'd have the big meeting. And we're starting, we think we're starting to make noise now. We're trying to get the word out.
2021.
Teaser.
Yes,
This year.
2021.
Okay.
Yep. And basically, by the end of December, the time frame is that, you know, you'd have a very good, solid draft in place. You know, the zoning approval process is likely to take more time than that. In terms of like planning commission public hearing, select board public hearing, you know, that can easily be a 6-month time frame in and of itself. But in terms of the majority of the work from Jeff's team, will be by the end of this calendar year, December of this calendar year.
Okay. I think
I've got-
are we the last committee to be updated to have a presentation?
I think you might be, Melinda.
Yeah.
I have to leave for another meeting, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, I believe you are the first commission board to kind of have this kind of presentation.
Okay, and all the other boards have had presentations, right? So everybody's.
Well, I think DRB had, Matt gave a presentation. I think, Jeff, you were at one of the DRB meetings. Planning Commission, I don't think you've come to a Planning Commission meeting yet, right? Or have you?
I think you
Yeah.
were, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's
Yeah.
what hack and
Yeah.
And Jeff, you've started a lot of your kind of one-on-one meetings as well with lots of different stakeholders to try to get a good solid handle on what's what. And the other first part of the step for Jeff's team is data gathering. So collecting all the GIS data and figuring out what exactly is going on where. And so they have all that to really start building once the real feedback comes during the charrette.
when hack just came up, Melinda, my first thought was, well, but do they really have, do they really have a lot of input to provide? And then I also thought how nice it would be if the growth center, it was obvious that it was influenced by the history and architecture of the village, even if it is not the same as the village.
Well, and remember that the hack also, they don't just review projects in the historic district, they also review projects in the design review district, which is much of Taft Corners. So,
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't be fuddled enough. I can't remember if I've met with the hack as a group. I may have, but we've had one-on-one or two-on-one interviews with them, a lot of their members, and have said to them, well, we think of them as this particular source for getting information about the architectural character that we'd like to bring into Taft Corners for the architectural standards.
Mhm. Reed, you're muted.
Is that a good place to stop? Terry, Laura, and Carl, do you have other questions?
No, I'm good. It was a great presentation. Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Regina and Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Regina. Yeah.
Yep, and if we have additional ideas or questions, we'll get them over to you.
Awesome.
Yes, please do. And you'll hear from us again.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.